Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another brand new video. So I recently just got back from YCS Raleigh and I wanted to go over my deck, do a little recap, and show you guys my explanations and thought process behind making a deck, especially into a brand new blind format, right? And I think it will be a little bit informative for you guys as well, for me to walk you guys through some of my thoughts, right? So if you guys didn't know, my own personal record was I actually started off 5-0 at the event, and I ended up losing round 6 and then just dropping from there because I actually had a huge headache, and I put my head down and slept for a little bit too long on one of the tables, and I wasn't able to complete out the entire tourney. Now, honestly, that's totally due to me and completely my fault. I definitely just had a little bit too much fun on Friday, and obviously with the time zone being different, I didn't sleep that much, and I didn't take any like medicine or anything. You know, maybe if I took like some Advil or Tylenol or something, maybe I could have felt a little bit better, but you know, I was a little bit stubborn there and didn't take anything. So when I woke up in the morning, I just had this huge headache, and I kind of like persevered and played through it anyway. But after round 6 or 7, I just pretty much couldn't take it anymore. And you know, maybe it's a learning experience for me too. You know, a little bit annoyed, but not too much, because I do feel like it is my fault at the end of the day. I could have done things to prevent that. So for next time, for other events, maybe I should definitely get some more sleep. And if I am missing sleep, definitely take some Advil before playing a huge long day. And I also, you know, very standard stuff. I've been playing Yugioh and honestly traveling to events for like over 7-8 years now, and you know, sometimes, you know, these basic things I just completely forget. So it's not something that I definitely didn't know, which is why I'm taking, you know, full accountability for that. But you know, that's another topic for another time. Let's go ahead and just talk about the deck in general here. So this is the Fire King Snake Eyes that I decided to bring. Now, I do think when building this deck, I had some thought process on, you know, what decks that would be most played, and then how I would be able to counteract those type of strategies, right? So obviously, going into this event, my first prediction was that the most played deck would be Rogue, right? I do think most people are just geared towards Rogue. I do think that even though this Fire King or the Snake Eyes deck is a quote-unquote tier 0 deck, I do think people just refuse to play it, and I'm gonna expect lots of rogue decks, which is between Voiceless Voice, Runic Stun, and a bunch of those Branded Despier, or you know, any of those variants of those type of decks. And I was honestly right? So some of the things that I made when considering you know, those decks into mind is that my non-engine, right? So obviously, in terms of engine, I do think everything here is standard all the way up into this hand trap portion. So everything here, which stops at this Droll and Lockbird, is 26 cards in this deck, and I do think the cap that you can reach on this deck before you start to fuck up the math a little bit is around 43 or 44 cards. But I do think the math is not quite accurate, because your card quality is very different in terms of each other, right? So for example, if I'm playing like a runic deck, I do think most runic cards, not all of them, but the idea of a runic card is similar in what you want it to do if you go first, right? If you draw any runic card, it's gonna special summon Hugin. So they kind of have like this role where, you know, things are more they're more similar to one another. Same with like sprite cards, right? Like any two level 2s will essentially do it, whether it's jet or blue, they'll pretty much grab each other, so on and so forth, right? But I think in this particular deck, I do think drawing a copy of Snake Eye Ash is a lot different than drawing a copy of Bonfire. So I do think the number in this deck actually does matter. So you want to increase it as much as or decrease it as much as possible, so that you do see Snake Eye Ash more often. And I do think 42 was the cap that where I was pretty happy about. Not entirely happy about, but I did not want to go over any more than this, because it could fuck up the math, because like I said, Bonfire is not the same thing as drawing Snake Eye Ash at all, right? So some things that I made to consider into this format is because of the wide variety of rogue decks, I do think Droll and Lockbird is a very safe pick into a bunch of all these rogue decks, which is why I decided to main it, even though it's something that wasn't main before in the past, right? And that was true for that, right? I ended up playing some Branded Despia players that played Patchwork, which is really good against. I played against what's that deck? Manadium, actually. I didn't draw this, but if I did, it would make my life a lot easier, but I did win against that matchup as well. And also, I played things such as even Kashtira, right? And like they play Pot of Prosperity and things like that, and like a bunch of rogue decks that like aren't on the map. This card is very, very good against, so that's why I ended up playing it, and it was absolutely amazing. And to note, another thing is I also thought a lot of the top players would also be playing Kashtira Snake Eyes, and if they played more copies of the Pressured Planet, then I think this card would have been really great also. So that's something to consider when I was building my decks and picking my non-engine, which is why I ended up putting Droll over something like Ghost Mourner, because Ghost Mourner was too low impact against those rogue decks, right? Like, and I was right? Like, drawing Ghost Mourner against Vanadium or drawing Ghost Mourner against Brandon Despia isn't really going to cut it, but if you draw something as powerful as a Droll, then it can give you that possibility to end their turn, which I think was a great call. And then everything else here seems to be pretty standard with Valor, Ash, Nibiru, Imperm, and Mourner. At first, I didn't have Nibiru into my main deck, and I was maining Bestial cards because I was predicting a bunch of Voice's Voice, but I figured without Summon Limit in Voice's Voice, it was definitely like an indirect nerf to the deck, and I do think I wasn't too worried about that deck because if they don't have Summon Limit, I feel pretty confident that I can crack their board, which happened many times. I played 3 Voice's Voice. I drew no hand traps against them multiple times, and I still won, which is pretty annoying because you know, I mean, give me an Ash Blossom or an Imperm or something, but I didn't have any, right? So but it was okay because I still won, which then made me feel like I didn't have to play Bestials in the main deck because I didn't have to compensate for that matchup because it was like easy anyway. So I focused on Nib because the fact that Nib can be very, very good paired with another hand trap into the mirror match or into any super combo deck, or even Despia, for example. If you have like Nib plus Ash Blossom, for example, like, it's still really, really good, even though like technically they can play around it, but sometimes they just can't, and it becomes really good in combinations of another card, right? Like if you can Valor, Cartesia, Nib them, still pretty solid in that aspect. So because I thought Voice's Voice was a little bit of an easy matchup, I ended up playing the Nibs to compensate for the more harder matchups. So that's how this Nib came out to be. Next up was the 2 Ghost Mourners just to fill up the remaining slots, and that's it for the hand traps into the mirror match. I just wanted to play 18 hand traps in the mirror. Now you could play Ghost Spell like I played previously before, like another regional, to up the count up to 21, but for this event I actually didn't want to take out the Fire King cards. I know I did that in the past, but for this event I decided to just take out the Sanctuary and a second copy of Kieran to put in the 2 Ghost Mourners for the mirror, and play 18 hand traps and have this Fire King engine, because I noticed a lot of times in the Fire King mirror specifically, I really want to take Pronix and I really want to take Garunix, but when I don't have you know, the island in my deck, or like, you know, Fire King cards in my deck, which I previously did, it would suck more. And the reason why I was okay with siding out Fire King cards back then is because I thought that there would be more Pure Snake Eyes variants. If it's against Pure Snake Eyes, then I don't have a problem taking out all my Fire King cards because there's no Hida plays. But for this event, I figured that like a lot of the people would gravitate towards Fire King, even though, you know, I think Pure was a little bit better. I still think a lot of people would default to Fire King because, like I said in the past video, people just assumed that Pure Snake Eyes was dead for some reason, and I thought like the majority of players would think that way, so they would play Fire King. So that's why I decided to keep the Fire King cards, and it was definitely a good choice. So I ended up playing like a Fire King deck, and it came up. Like, it came up. And then Bestial cards were just for Voice's Voice. And then I ended up playing Cosmic and Twin Twister. So I decided to play 6 copies of back removal because I was too afraid of Runic Stun. I got bodied by Runic Stun pretty much the night before, and I figured I wanted another card against them. And I was thinking of a lot of the options I could play between this, Golden Lord, and Tillman's Heartbeat, actually, which is cards that can be really good against the Runic deck. But I ended up playing Twin Twister because it's better into cards like Skill Drain. And it also has a lot of cross matchups too, right? You can set this card against Flu, it's pretty good. You can even draw it going second against Flu, draw phase, hit the trap and the field spell, which is pretty good. And if they don't have Harpy's Featherstorm, then this card will carry you. And if you activate this going first against like Voice's Voice even, right, you can kill the barriers and things like that. So I thought this card had more multi-purpose. I'm not even kidding, I had Eldritch the Golden Lord in on Thursday, but I was like, I really wanted to be more spread out and have more matchups, so I ended up using the Twin Twisters, and they were pretty good. For me, I played against one guy that was playing Runic Stun, and I definitely misplayed against him, but I could have won that match because I was well prepared, but that's definitely on me and, you know, my lack of sleep, right? Next up was the Crossout Designators, nothing to stay here, and then the 1 copy of Anti-Spell Fragrance. I did have deck Lockdown in my deck prior to this, but then I figured that like last minute everyone was just gonna play hand traps. I had this idea that people would like gravitate towards board breakers, but in the end I figured that most people would like come to the conclusion that you just still can't play board breakers even though there's no Baron Savage, because I found out about like the Omega Dissipator and stuff like that on Thursday. So when I noticed people were doing that combo, I was like, nah, no, like if people find out that everyone's doing like hand loop combos, you just can't be playing cross out, or not cross out. You just can't be playing like deck lockdown and stuff like that, because if you get hand trapped and you activate deck lockdown, you're kind of like, you're stuck, right? And it makes it in a way where floodgates aren't that good, because a high amount of hand traps are essentially a way to negate how do you call it, board breakers, or not board breakers, floodgates. I just can't speak right now. But yeah, if you draw 2 to 3 hand traps, it essentially negates the floodgate, because the floodgate becomes way less ineffective without a board. So I decided just to play anti-spell, because if I just randomly draw against like Brandon, for example, it's not really meant for the mirror match, even though I will side it for the mirror match. But I wanted it to be there just in case I play some crazy board breaker or branded decks and I just draw this card to sack them. So I just wanted to play one, and I drew it one time, and it got cosmic. So there's that. I'm like, damn, why'd you side in cosmic? It's at 1, bro. Like, like I thought people would just disrespect it, and like, but yeah, it got cosmic. So, well, and then extra deck was all the same. The only thing that changed in this extra deck here is I played Doolittle Chimera, which is the replacement for the Heat Soul stuff, because I figured without the Heat Soul stuff, you had to make a board that was, more impressive. But that doesn't really make any sense by playing Doolittle, because Doolittle requires that your opponent not to interact with you in terms of hand traps. But like I said, people would hand trap me all day, so I couldn't even get to the Doolittle. And typically, which is why I think the Fire King deck honestly sucks now, is because typically when you get hand trapped, one of the best things that you can do is go Heat Soul and then start drawing cards, and then you can actually, draw into non-engine, draw into fire cards, to get your Fire King cards active and things of nature. But when you get hand trapped and you don't have that second line of play like Heat Soul, your board is so bad. Like, it just does not have anything. And yeah, like, even though I did fairly well with the deck, and I could have potentially done even more well if I didn't drop, I just feel like without the Heat Soul stuff, it just made this deck a little bit more fragile, and in a way where I just didn't like it. Obviously, I do think if the meta was all board breakers, this deck could be potentially good. Because I do think this deck is actually really resilient to board breakers, funny enough, even though it has no Omni negates. Like, the fact that this card has Kieran in hand, Princess Engraved, Runix Engraved, it's like pretty spread out, right? So I do think like one Droplets isn't going to cut it here. Like, what are you going to do? Droplets my IP or Droplets my Appaloosa? Okay, sure. I have Kieran in hand, Princess Engraved, Runix Engraved. Like, the board breakers aren't really breaking any boards, right? So, that's kind of how it is. Overall, my final thoughts was, I actually think for this event, my deck was okay. I don't think I would change anything. I thought my deck was pretty good. The reason why I lost was definitely just my fault. So definitely for next time, live and learn. Something that I need to take account for is, if you have a headache, take an Advil, take a Tylenol, and definitely, if you are considering doing very well at an event, go to sleep on Friday and try not to go out and have too much fun. And that's about it. Let me know what you guys think. I know this was a long one and kind of a mouthful, but I did have a lot of things I wanted to talk about. So that'll be it for this one. If you guys made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and a sub, and I'll catch you all in the next one.